So this is the final session of the Queer Class Relations Conference, and I just want to thank everybody in this room and everybody watching on the webinar at home for being here and not just participating, but really being present in offering your thoughts, your ideas, your colleagueship, and hopefully your resources going forward out of this conference. We said at the beginning of the conference that we wanted queer class relations not just to be the theme or the topic of the weekend, but we want queer class relations to be a practical legacy of the conference. And so we want to find ways to continue the work of class crossover enabled by queer people, queer studies, queer institutions, and queer labor. And so part of what we're going to do in this final session of the conference is just do a little bit more labor, more work together to try to see, even though we've just been in the mix of the conference, to try to see what we did and to see what we might do going forward. So here's my idea, is that we want to have a lot of audience participation. We need your voices as well as the voices of the folks at home on the webinar. So here is what we're going to try to do. Chad? Okay, so if on the webinar the folks are seeing this, I think that's what, but also if they could see, if you could put the chat up so that the folks at home can participate as well and we'll be able to see what they're writing. The vision for the conference, as I said, was for queer class relations not just to be the topic, but the practical legacy. And so I want to do a little work thinking about 3 questions. What words are in your mind from the weekend? If you had the right, I have index cards, but I think it's going to be too hard to hand them out. So what words are on your mind? Is anybody really good at taking notes and typing in front of people? Could you help? Thanks, Adam. The assignment is just what you hear, put it in the notes. Thank you. So we have other mics here, but I think it would work best if you just shout out what you're thinking, and then if you have something more in-depth to say, we can get a mic out to you. So from the weekend, what words are in your mind? What words come to mind? You don't have to raise your hand, just shout them out. All struggle is class struggle. Confronting the academy. If you can help me, if somebody writes something in the chat, if you can say that what they said. Redistribution of resources, thank you. Solidarity, thank you, Riley.
Can you put in parentheses next to solidarity, welding?
Well, did you say welding? Welding. Ah, yeah. Coalition building, thank you, Lynn. Value, thank you, Manuel. Organizing as method, thank you, Maddie. Collectivism, always available. Patty says desire. Desire. Desire is the social engine of change. Thanks, Patty. Any other words? Who are your people? Who do you belong to? And community is labor. Let me ask that differently. Are there any words that you heard this weekend that you didn't expect to hear? Are there any panels you didn't expect? Self-financing. Where did you hear that, Patty? Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, that's right. The Black Queer Archiving Workshop. That's right. Care Not Cops, yeah. Self-financing. So I'm asking now about if anything surprised you. A couple people, myself included, made the observation that this didn't feel like MLA or different kinds of conferences. It didn't feel nerve-wracking and sweaty and competitive and networky, which is good because we want to form connections. Heather.
I would say what stuck with me was being oriented toward power or not. And I'm thinking about that.
So the question of being oriented toward power or not, or away from power. Yeah, something. And if not oriented toward power, then what are we oriented to? What might we be oriented to? Yeah.
These didn't come as a surprise, but I processed them. So two things that I'll be beginning with is mutual aid and abolition.
Mutual aid and abolition. Thank you. So from the chat, what are you willing to sacrifice for solidarity? What are you willing to sacrifice for solidarity? And ecology / foregrounding environmentalism. Ecology / foregrounding environmentalism. Thank you, everybody at home, for participating. This is great. Thank you. Okay, so those are the words that are on our minds, some surprising, some not. The next thing I'd like to do is if you can remember, what is next? Moments. If you can remember a moment from the conference. I think some of the things that are memorable, that stick with us, are the ways that we can form connections, right, through those memorable moments. What was memorable for you from this conference? It could be a panel. You might want to call out somebody's name who was great.
Many things, but when Lisa Dugan started her comment about Amber Hollabaugh, I acknowledged Dorothy Allison and the other people with whom Amber had been in the community at that time. And I wanted to remember Alan Murphy. I wanted to, along with Dorothy,
So Lisa is talking about one of the panels where Lisa Dugan named not only Amber Hollabaugh, who the panel was about, but several people in that constellation, including Dorothy Allison. And what other name did you say? I want to say it, Lisa. Oh yeah, Alan Berry, yeah. So we're thinking about moments.
I noticed that to divide and conquer is sort of like this progression, and instead I noticed that to divide is to conquer because we're constantly policing each other, and once you can divide a group, you've already conquered them. That was just a big thing that was it just a slight change to my perspective that I'm going to take with me.
So that being divided by power is still being oriented toward it, like Heather was saying. Yeah. It's one of the ways that power orients us away from each other.
There was a moment at the
The re-speech moment.
Get on the subway right now and get there.
Yeah, so this is a question of what are queer places, are the and what's happening to them, and how much it means to us to have them. And then
There's a bit of a backlog in the chat, so
Okay.
I'll just narrate it.
Thank you.
It was, I think, the accessibility of Eli Clare's talk, how good the slowness felt.
So the accessibility of Eli Clare's talk, Adam.
How good the slowness felt. Sohail Asefi's presentation.
So the slowness, how good it felt in Eli's presentation, and then Sohail, where's Sohail? Are you here? Brilliant scholar here at the Grad Center. Does it say what was so good about it? Let's just put Sohail, S-O-H-E-I-L. I spelled Sohail's name wrong in the program. I'm so sorry.
How does archiving change impact the activist, the archivist?
How does archiving impact the archivist?
I loved the Black Archives panel, and when they spoke about keeping people's stories alive and putting it out there.
Keeping people's stories alive in Black Archives. Sohail just came in. Hi, Sohail. We were just talking about you.
That commenter, thank you for that. I learned things I never expected. That last comment is in response to Matt asking what about Sohail's presentation.
Still vague, but getting there. Who's saying that? We can call them out. Who is saying this? Please say more. Sohail, you have a fan, but they're like sort of saying, yeah, KG, exactly. You have a KG fan. I was surprised that so many people came to a conference called the Queer Class Relations Conference. Did that surprise you? Just that we didn't know what we would get. And people showed up. This is it? Yeah, I mean, annual, that seems, we're not going to do this again. No, it wasn't the first annual. However, we're going to get to later thinking about connections and models that we understood ourselves as already having, but models that could push us forward. So let me take this opportunity to say this could be the first annual Queer Class Relations Conference, and it could move around from here to wherever you are. One of the reasons that the conference was here is because it's CUNY, and CLAGS at CUNY has thought a lot about class over the years, right? Because of our particular situation in this, the nation's largest public urban university with some of the poorest one of the poorest student bodies in higher ed. But another reason this conference what made this conference possible was the fact that there was a conference in the fall. Was anybody here for the Lesbian Lives Conference? Now that conference was incredible, right? That conference had like 600 lesbians, 700 lesbians in this building, and that's a building you want to be in for as long as you can. But the powerhouse behind that, Julie Enzer, gave us a model of how to do this weekend. And the most important thing, I said this before, but it is important, you got to feed people, Julie said. You feed them, you welcome them, you make them feel at home. And then I think our model and Julie's model was alike, which is whoever wants to be here, whoever submits I think we maybe didn't take one or two submissions because they were clearly from the corporate world and they wanted to come sell something here, but everybody else we took. If you want to be here, we want to welcome you here. And this is from Julie. This is from who's the editor of Sinister Wisdom, and from Lesbian Lives. And so what I'm talking about right now is a model for how this conference came to be. All the detail work, but also all of the coalition building that Julie did was a model for us. Yeah. So let's think about this. Let's think about what kind of models we saw for connecting ideas. This can be about the work, right? Oh, in my work, I saw ideas connected, or for my work, I saw ideas connected at the Queer Class Relations Conference, and I'm going to, make the most out of those connections. It could be connections with people. You met people. You want to work with them. You want to just be friends with them. You want to share work. But also connecting resources to each other and sharing, redistributing. Did we see models for that? And so all of those are part of the question of, is there actually going to be another queer class, not just conference, but is there a queer class relations project? Did we do something? People talk about queer class all the time, but is there something bigger that emerges? Heather? I'm gonna bring you a mic. That one's on a wire. You can just keep this and pass it around.
Thank you. I guess just to sort of frame my comment in relation to what you said, Matt, about people talk about queer class all the time, because I think that's part of what is kind of has been up for discussion or interesting to me is that, I think part of the fire that led us to do the conference, the conference in Philly, all you guys doing this amazing work was kind of like there's a gap here, like we're not talking about this in the way that we would like to be. We want more people to think through these questions. So I think I was having some feelings, some powerful feelings around the Amber Hollabaugh panel, because I was like, and also talking to Lisa Henderson and being like, there is a lot of work. There's a lot of older work, but there's somehow a generational failure to connect, I would say. Like, there's a lot of people who I'm working with, like, as grad students now, for instance, who are very interested in this work, and I'm doing my best to mentor them and put them in touch with people who I think can help them. But it was a kind of moment of being like, are we kind of reinventing the wheel, or why have those lessons of that moment, why does it feel like it's a missing discourse, or that there isn't that kind of community, and that other topics in queer studies have had more sort of continuity across generations, right? Performativity or temporality or, other kinds of questions that are more present to us. And so I'm sort of curious about the generational piece. And I was so happy that panel was here, and also that Lisa did sort of create that context. Lisa Dugan named that context for us. And so I'm sort of curious to think about that question and how we can kind of build those bridges more, I guess. That would help me as a sort of mid-generation, probably mentor, who often feels like I just have to point and be like, look, there's all this work, but it's not somehow, and it's partly because a lot of those people didn't get jobs famously, but it also hasn't been the sort of canonized part of the field. So anyway.
Hey, Heather, do you want to come up here?
You want me to go
sit up here? Yeah.
Should I leave behind?
We've got more up here, yeah. So if you leave that one, we've got another one for you.
Oh, can bring it. Thanks.
Heather, by the way, is somebody that I think of as having a kind of depth of understanding of academic fields, not just queer studies, that is...
I was like, what are you giving me?
That really helps us make sense of what we're doing, and so I think that's what you're doing right now, is you're trying to make some connections and see blank spaces. That's a very hard conceptual work to do, even just seeing the blank spaces.
Well, I'm basically cribbing from Lisa. Lisa did point it out to me. I don't know if you want to speak to this at all, Lisa, because I think you have, and the specific context that we were talking about, and this also came up for me in Gareth's paper, was sort of like yeah, it's like we're sort of kind of reviving a kind of queer Marxism or instituting it, but the sort of cultural materialist, like all of those generations of Marxism and materialist thought, somehow we have to kind of remake that entire history. Anyway, so I don't know if I'm kind of inviting you to talk, Lisa, but.
Everybody at home, this is Lisa Henderson.
Yeah, at the very, very tail end of my career, like I'll be retiring in December. So I bring a certain, not nostalgia, I mean personal nostalgia, but I think what's really important at this conference is that lots of, like the panel with Amber, I heard a panel of young scholars this afternoon who'd been pre-recorded talking about, one of whom was talking about Dorothy Allison. Like, so there are some bridging moments and multiple generations present, which I think is great. And continuities. It's not like, sort of emerging scholars and old folks like me, but Heather, I think you do a lot of bridging work and have for a long time. So for me, it's not a complaint in any sense. It's just like, well, is there something that I can contribute from media and cultural studies that offers some bridging, that is in conversation? There's a whole lot of going on here about activism that I sort of know about but don't do or haven't done for a while. And I've been a dean for the last few years, which both privileges and incapacitates me in certain ways. But then there are things that I can, that people like me can offer. So I'd first want to start by saying that what the conceptual bridge building could look like if that were the point. It's like, well, there's so much work from Amber and others that I thought I heard people drawing from, and maybe it's a matter of making the bridges more explicit, or raising that question of what is both the continuity and the discontinuity among elders and emerging activists and scholars. It's not well put, but it's not raw material. All the foundational work, I think, is there, and it could be very fun. But I would say that because I'm very grateful for the company of young scholars and activists.
I think something apropos of this conversation, Maddie, what's Ivy's last name? I'm sorry. Quan Arce? So, Quan Arce, thank you. Maddie Beaton put together the Care Not Cops panel, and Ivy was an old ACT UP member, joined ACT UP New York in 1990, and was talking about in Maddie's panel coming back to ACT UP, but had she been out of it, and how the return actually was difficult, to go back to the place where she had learned so much and where she had taught so much. And I wonder, Amber's gone, obviously, and so that we're thinking about maybe in terms of finding the past or bringing it back, but maybe it's the case that people who were involved in the struggle, or even in an academic topic or subject, move on. And even they have trouble coming back. If that's where a lot of the knowledge is, or the memory is, what are the difficulties of the return to a place that we've been intellectually as an activist? Maybe in our individual selves, continuity is a problem.
Hello? Okay. No, definitely not.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm just thinking about, and it's actually funny because I thought about the thing I would have shared earlier was from the Halaba piece also, and just the idea of the left was her school, right? And I wonder a little bit about, as we're talking about bridges and connections, like what does it look like also to acknowledge that some people are not in this space originally or don't see that space as their space. And so when I don't know that the answer would necessarily be here, right? Depending on who's in the room right now and how much that requires the energy of people who are out doing the work differently, right? And Amber obviously wrote, she had a way to funnel into that to connect. But if someone who doesn't have that to them, how do they make that connection back to it, right? And so I think about the importance of the archivalship, but then often that's after something's already gone, right? And so it doesn't necessarily reconnect back and like build that bridge. So I think I'm thinking a lot about what does, and this came up for me a little bit when we were talking about Reese. When we talk about education in these spaces, who are we including in that and what type of education are we talking about, right? Because even some of our conversations, someone who hasn't gone to higher education but still is desirous of being a part of this work would not have access just from that place. So how are we increasing accessibility from multiple levels for multiple people?
There's a related comment in the chat.
Okay.
Is it the long paragraph? To speak to the generational disconnect. Speaking firsthand from the queer Midwest, there's a lot of discourse happening in queer working class communities that is not going to be represented at an academic conference due to people's reluctance to be exploited by people who have more power and eligibility within those systems. So pointing here to the obstacles for crossover, sharing, seeing each other, being in the spaces, having the experience of being exploited and not wanting to repeat that experience in this case.
There's a couple requests to give the people at home a view of the room, not the screen. That's possible.
The film theorist is telling me how to shoot the room right now. I don't understand. Oh, okay, sorry. Is it possible to see the room?
Just stop sharing the screen.
Yeah.
I don't know where the camera is for the room.
So Chad, can you, instead of the note-taking document, Adam, thank you. Can you stay there and continue? Thank you. Chad, instead of the note-taking document, can you turn on the camera just to the room? Is that what we're doing? I mean, ideally, the camera would be going that way is the thing. Okay, we'll try. We're trying to do that.
I mean, one thing I think about a lot and wonder about is kind of this question of access and elite institutions, or just the university, not even elite, but the sort of barriers to participation and the unequal power relations that structure conversation, research, et cetera. And I think, like, thinking about that in the context of the present, and the fact that many people who are here, for instance, who are in master's and PhD programs, are not going to belong to that institution because that institution is radically changing under our feet. So I just wonder if our kind of habitual ways of thinking about the relationship between the inside and the outside of the university actually do change. I'm not saying I know how they're going to change, but I think since this section is also about models, and we did this research. This is one model that we did, but I think we have to figure out. We have to think ahead, and we should have always been thinking about this, about models that really radically cross that boundary, because that boundary, I think, looks a lot different from how it has in the past.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ann Bailey in her keynote in a really pointed and powerful way, thought about, framed a sort of really a radical departure from the kind of borderlines that we've been thinking about, or boundaries that we often think about. Maddie. Miguel, thank you for that comment, by the way.
All right, whoa, too much. Thinking about boundaries and geographies, I'm going to just sit, sorry. Boundaries and geographies, not thinking of like an inside outside of the university as like a binary, because we know that that's never been the case and it's rapidly changing. I'm also just thinking about moments of dismantling and rebuilding that happen with like university occupations. I was thinking for our panel in 1991, there was a CUNY occupation at the other location. That ACT UP New York actually like wrote a lot of flyers about the relationship between healthcare and education, and then the CUNY graduate students were going to the picket line for home care workers at the time. And I think a lot of that influences our present wear spaces like Reese and what will happen to Reese, and the ways sex work function in relationship to debt and being a graduate student. Like, we are embodying a lot of the tensions and complications depending on the intersections of our where we are situated. And I'm just wondering how we continue to work through that intergenerationally, right? And that there are so many lessons from the past for dreaming of futures, and at the same time, we are in an unprecedented space. Yeah.
I think a thing that I would have said, wow, I see your point, is an unexpected thing throughout the conference for me was actually the amount of joy you saw, in particular from like panel discussions of people who mostly, maybe they knew each other, but even if they didn't, there was a lot of like camaraderie, community, wanting to connect, wanting to reach out to others. And I think I saw that in so many spaces that it would have stood out if it wasn't there, right? And I think about what Maddie's sharing now and the importance, if we're talking about intergenerational bridges, like what do those relationships look like? How are they being built? And there's so much that I know now about class, organizing all these pieces from my friendship with Maddie that I didn't know before showing up here, and I wouldn't know if we hadn't built this person-to-person relationship. And I think about hearing that at the Reese panel, at the Care Not Cops panel this morning. Like, it's clear that the relational piece is really important, and I don't know how often we shed a light or see that connection. Even just now, I was introduced to someone and we had a really fruitful conversation that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have someone else who was like, oh, I want you to meet this person, right? But I feel like those more, those bricks that build up the community don't always get as talked about until it's like after the fact, right? Yeah.
Riley. You gonna talk about the tingling sensation I had in our...
No, I think we should move on from that. I just wanted to light up something from the chat, which I actually think, unless there were other people quoting it, very likely might be from my talk, which is when I cited you about the refusal of choosing capitulation or revolution. That's what the queer work is. So I just want to light that up. That's a Heather Love citation.
This is Riley Smith, everybody. Riley, with Heather, put together the UPenn Classroom Symposium, which was on the 15th, 16th. Huge event as a kind of not just an intellectual prelude to this conference, but actually a way of moving people to this conference that we could not figure out how to do, that Heather and Riley figured out how to do. So appreciate it, Riley. Yeah. We can move to thinking about, not theoretically what kind of models are there, but just like opportunities. Maybe we can just end by saying, hey, here's an opportunity. Emmanuel David is back here, and he's a colleague from the University of Colorado Boulder, and he really generously asked me to co-edit an issue of English language notes, which is now at University of Colorado Boulder, and this is on global queer trans class relations, and so that CFP is on the conference website. If you go to just Google queer class relations, it's a really long URL, but that you'll see the CFP there, and so that's just an opportunity to continue to build out of this conference that I want to make you aware of. Does anybody else have opportunities for connection? Riley?
So something that those of us who were engaged in the pre-conference symposium were trying to think about how to keep that cohort together. And we were thinking about how many of us as grad students have access to like a little bit of money that we can spend on things through working groups or whatever else. And so we were thinking about generating like a directory of people who are interested in this kind of work, who might want to be in touch about putting things together where we can pool our resources. Because, like me and my working group, we can't necessarily do a lot, but a bunch of us working together, we might be able to do something. So if people are into that.
Riley, will you say your email address, please, so that directory will happen?
Sure. Should I give my social too, date of birth? My email address is, it's RYLEES@sas.upenn.edu. And yeah, please be in touch. Does anyone have the context citation for the Heather Love piece above? Yes. It is a GLQ roundtable from 2012 on, it's like queer materialism and crisis. It's page, no, I'm just kidding.
But I did not follow the prompt. That was a kind of roundtable on queer Marxism, and I was just like, just want to talk about like social class and experience.
Yep.
So I have, I'm going to share my moment. Why am I sitting down? I'm just going to go over here. So the moment that I thought about that resonated with me from this conference was actually in the third film screening for the We Are Abundant film screening, and there was a panelist there called, or named, oh my goodness, Ellis? What was it? Heidi Ellis, thank you. And Heidi Ellis made a comment that was, that actually referenced something that I think anyone that moves with or moves through like working class systems would resonate with, which is never to confuse access with belonging. And that made me think about all the spaces I've been in where if my voice is accepted as the activist, the word art is not, and vice versa, where my creative work is accepted as like the kind of art that it is, the sort of activist stuff is like, oh, okay. So I'm always thinking about how does, or maybe to answer your question more directly, like how does a university space, or even, maybe not even like at institutional level, but maybe how do individual professors and classes or spaces bring in something like the Poor People's Campaign into its educational structure, especially for classes or just educational modules about class, because I think that's what I think, just that the possibilities there.
Thanks. It's Patricia Silva, filmmaker. So we can talk until 5:30, but I just want to say one place that if you want to share resources with each other after the conference is this note-taking document. It's an open Google Doc. If you go to the conference website, you'll see the topmost link in the updates. You can just click on it and add opportunities to the top of this page. Just add them to the top. Bullet point it or make it organized in a way that people will understand it. But one is the CFP. If you have other, real ways to connect, this is a place to share those opportunities. Riley.
I just have this in case anyone wants it.
I should say one of the things that made this conference what it is that we did a sliding scale registration fee. And many more people paid $10 or under to be here than paid $100 or more. But it was the right balance. Enough people paid $100 or more, and enough people paid $10 or less to have the intellectual vitality, to have the diversity of experience, the diversity of ages, the diversity of class, as much as we could. And that financial component also was enough money to buy food. I'm going to end with the food. When we think about resources, at least at CUNY, we know that it often doesn't take that much money to do something really great. And it doesn't cost everybody the same thing to do something really great. And this conference is a good example. Enough people paid more, and that makes sense that, oh yeah, enough people paid more so we had X dollars to buy food. But you have to think about it the other way. Enough people didn't pay to make this conference what it is. And enough people paid to make this conference what it is. And I think that combination, that dynamic is really important. It would not have been the conference that it has been if everybody paid if everybody had to and did pay $250 to get in the door.
Can I don't know if you're trying to head toward the door, but it's rhetorically, I mean. But I mean, I think there is a real model, a model I've been very impressed with is the Manchester Summer School, Sexuality Summer School. I'm looking at you, Gareth, because I believe people do not pay to go to that. Is that right? Okay, yeah. But I mean, as an event, it is truly community facing, and I'm kind of calling you out, Gareth, in case you wanted to talk about it at all, but I do think I experienced it as a very different kind of space from a lot of academic spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has kind of similarities as well with the kind of queer classroom event prior to this, the kind of inviting kind of both sort of kind of academics to give lectures, but also focusing on the kind of graduates' own work as well, giving lots of space for that during the week. And then there's also kind of a public series of events like in the city that kind of join up the academic with stuff that we're doing with long-term partners like across Manchester. So, yeah.
And the budget for that sort of week 10-day event is, I think you know.
It's about £10,000, I think.
It's doable, is what I'm saying.
Which is like something that Jackie, who runs it, just every year kind of gets from like small pots. Like it's kind of £1,000 here, £1,000 there. So it's not something that is secure at all.
I'm up for anything like that. I mean, I'm saying I'm up for organizing that kind of thing. If anybody wants to give that a go.
And sharing details about that is important. If anybody wants details, maybe they can reach out to you, Gareth. If anybody wants details about how this conference came together, the actually nitty-gritty, what are the parts, what are the pieces, Julie Enzer, I'm sure, would be happy to talk about, if you're thinking about a gathering, Lesbian Lives. But, it's just having some of those really practical models at your disposal. There's nothing to hide here. We want to give away what happened here and everything that happened behind the scenes, too. Anybody else have something to offer, an opportunity, a model, something that looks toward next steps? It's tough at the end of the second day of a conference. It's tough to think, but if you do, please feel free to put those in the doc, in the Google Doc. I hope that if you were a presenter, first of all, thank you so much for being here and your participation in this last panel, which was just sort of, we didn't know what would happen. So
I'm going to say let's please thank Matt Brim for his incredible leadership and his vision.
And not all of the CLAGS people, staff, and board are here, but a couple are, and Maddie has just been incredible. So thanks, Maddie. Yasmina, Donna is back in the booth. Chad is in the booth, and then a ton of interns as well. Miguel, who sort of just started helping because you're nice. We really appreciate it. So thank you to everybody here, and hopefully you'll think of a next step, another way to work, not just on your own work, but to work together, which would be a great outcome. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good Saturday night in New York.